I'm talking today with Alan Muscat, the Mushroom Man. Alan's a mythic mycologist and epicure of the obscure. He's persuaded thousands to sample rather than trample the toadstools. From coast to coast, this taxonomic troubadour has enchanted audiences of all ages with mushroom poetry, music, folklore, and flavors from around the world. He's recently popped up at the California Academy of Sciences, the University of North Carolina, and the New York Nature Conservancy. As anyone who knows the Mushroom Man will tell you, when it comes to bringing out the fun in fungi, he's the champignon. Hi, Alan. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
How did you come to be interested in mushrooms in the first place?
Well, I was into wild foods, and I was eating wild plants and nuts and roots and doing some medicine with my partner at the time, who was an herbalist, and ended up here and living with two more herbalists, and they thought, well, you might as well specialize and get your niche with mushrooms because no one else is doing it. And it was her idea. She handed me this book and thought, I think you'll enjoy this. And pretty soon I just started seeing them. I had never seen them before, walking through the woods. And it's the kind of thing that's all or nothing when you're on your own. And I just dove right into it. And yeah.
Are you mostly self-taught, or did you take courses in?
Yeah, I learned on my own. I didn't learn this in school. I did it with, one book and then another, and eventually found out that there's actually clubs of people equally enthusiastic, and decided over time that that's actually a lot easier way for people to learn is through other people.
Yeah. So how long have you been picking mushrooms for, or identifying them?
It's less than 10 years. I'd say about 8. And that grew into teaching and then gathering and selling for restaurants.
And you had that business for a while, but you no longer gather and sell to restaurants. Is that right?
Well, I've got someone else doing it and hoping that he or someone else will take it over. And I still pick on occasion, and bring them in, but sort of remove myself from running it around, from being the sort of commodities broker end of it. Yeah.
How much can a pound of mushrooms from around this area potentially fetch from a restaurant?
Yeah. At least I would get is 10 a pound, and that's if I happen to have, 50 pounds to sell. But I have about 30 restaurants I could bring them to, and typically, since I'm not picking that much, I can get 17 a pound, on the high end. Yeah.
What are some of the other wild foods that one might find in the woods in western North Carolina?
Well, right now, you would find nuts and you would dig roots. And I just dug some sarsaparilla and some sassafras, traditional root beers, but, they're medicinal as well. And I also gathered black walnuts, and you can get acorns now. And, of course, there's plants. I just picked yesterday some nettles. We're going to have a let food be your medicine dinner tonight, actually.
Huh.
Yeah, we have a guest who's just at Earth Fair teaching wild fermentation. So we're going to have a big dinner, and I'm making fritters out of the nettles, and I'm making a pudding out of a mushroom that I have.
What's your favorite wild food to eat?
Yeah, wow. It's hard to say. I mean, it's the variety that's exciting about them. But if I had to say, there are certain mushrooms, like there's one that tastes like a cross between roast beef and walnuts that I really love.
Huh. What's that one called?
The parasol.
Huh.
Yeah, there are a number of parasols. And just the other day, I mistook something for a parasol that was completely different. And I had to admit to the class the next day, it was on a weekend, that after taking a closer look, it was something that was edible, luckily, but it's good that I didn't just, jump right into cooking it up.
Huh.
Yeah.
What are some of the, weirder mushrooms in terms of their appearance or their smell?
Yeah, well, we also found last weekend a stinkhorn. And
that doesn't sound good.
No. No, it has a Latin name. One of them is called Phallus imputicus because it has a resemblance to part of the male anatomy.
I'll just guess which part.
And it really stinks. What's funny is it's kind of like a skunk. I mean, if it was just a little bit of that smell, I bet they're putting that in perfumes and colognes right now. But as it gets older, it stinks more and more, and that attracts flies to it, who think that it's rotting food or something, and they'll land on it and spread the spores. But when it's an egg, when it hasn't quite hatched, so to speak, it's eaten by Chinese as a delicacy.
Huh.
Yeah.
I heard you speak at Leaf Festival in Black Mountain about the idea of mushrooms as living beings. And I wondered if you could just talk some more about that.
Yeah, that's sort of the cutting edge for me, and part of the reason that I haven't been that involved with the business so much anymore. And I even have felt in my teaching somewhat basically like a pimp. If you look at mushrooms as people, and in fact, more specifically, as you study mushrooms, you realize that they are only part of a fungus. That when you pick the mushroom, it's like picking apples from a tree. You're leaving the rest of the fungus in the ground to produce more. Well, that's very nice, but when you're picking the mushroom, first of all, it's only a part of the whole creature, and secondly, the whole creature, I like to believe, has the same qualities, the same spirit that we have, that make us talk to each other as people, not as an it. And when I got interested in that through medicine and through involvement with Susan Weed, who's a herbalist that has that sort of holistic approach to healing, and come to think that having that respect for the natural world in general could be part of what's lacking in making us whole people in a whole community, and feeling really a part of the earth. Yeah.
How large do mushroom or funguses grow underneath the ground, the parts that you can't see?
Yeah, good you ask, because that's a part that's a little confusing for people. But they grow in logs as well, and some mushrooms will attack dying trees, and you'll see it on the tree, but it will be spreading through the ground. And in fact, the largest creature on Earth, not just a fungus, but the largest living thing on Earth, is a mushroom, a fungus in Oregon that is 3.5 miles across. So that there'll be mushrooms popping up throughout those entire about 2,000 acres, but they're all connected, just like a patch of grass. Is one unit with a bunch of rhizomes spreading, so they can get that big. Over this is estimated 2,500 years old.
Wow. Now, I think I read in your booklet that you wrote something about some mushrooms are sympathetic with certain trees, and they can actually move around water or nutrients as the trees might need them. Is that right? Yeah.
It's great to bring that up, because excuse me, the ecology of a natural area is so complex that it's only in the last 30 years we realize how big a part that fungus plays, that network, through the ground, connecting all the trees and plant life. 90% of the plant life or more depends on fungi, and not always ones that we can see that produce mushrooms. But that can shuffle around water and nutrients. It actually acts like an internet for the forest. And if you transplant a tree or a plant, you don't have a big clump of soil with all of its partners in there that it's in symbiosis with. Chances are it will die. That's how they started to realize something was going on that you can't see. There's a community there of interdependence, and really the line between the mushroom and the plant is obscure, because those threads of it's called mycelium, they're running through the soil like a spider web. They actually go into the roots of the tree, and they interpenetrate, and so that connection is really intimate, and it's millions and millions of years old.
Do you think some mushrooms might be sympathetic, if you will, with certain people? That there might be like a special connection between a certain type of mushroom and a certain type of person? Maybe a more sophisticated version of people who look like they're dogs, and dogs who look like they're people? Or I don't know.
Yeah, there's people out there like Terence McKenna who postulate that the psychedelic mushrooms have that affinity with humans. on a large scale, and have really almost guided our cultural evolution. I mean, you could see that in the 60s, certainly, but the use of them is thousands of years old. And I think that some of the fear around mushrooms is not about them being deadly, but actually being what they call entheogenic, because they've been used spiritually, religiously to get people in contact with whatever god or deity you have in mind, and it opens up that mind, and so they've been used in ritual contexts, and that's where that taboo comes from. It's like you don't just mess around with these, and I still tell people that, even though I think they're great in a context that's respectful and is part of a desire to get connected with that greater whole. Yeah.
Well, I certainly heard that taboo loud and clear when I was growing up. That you never eat a wild mushroom or even touch it or even smell it or you'll just drop dead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not true. I mean, people should know that you can touch or smell any mushroom even if it's deadly, and it's harmless. You don't want to taste any mushroom. It doesn't take much if you swallow it to kill you, but yeah.
I'm fairly new to mushrooms, but I grew up in Minnesota where there's a lot of agates, and I would spend a lot of time walking along lake shores and sometimes gravel pits, but mostly lake shores looking for agates. And to me, mushroom hunting almost seems like the mountainside equivalent of agate hunting, that you can walk and walk and walk, and sometimes you find nothing, and sometimes you just find this incredible gem. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's like someone asked me, what do you like about it? And I said, it's like treasure hunting. Because, sometimes they're sort of hidden. Maybe there's some leaves like this time of year on top of it. But for the most part, they're just hidden because we don't notice them. I mean, it's amazing. Like I said at the beginning, I didn't see them before. And now there's just these, they're colored like jewels, all kinds of colors. And I had never noticed them before. And now, you realize that they're also edible, and that I just read yesterday that the reishi, which is called the mushroom of immortality, in China, is one of the most common wood rotters, tree parasites, in the southeast around Georgia Savannah area. And there was no mention of it being medicinal at all. It was in this, Forest Service listing on how to get rid of, this thing that's like, killing your trees. And it's just hilarious.
Wow. Well, let's take a commercial break. Are you looking for joy, passion, and purpose in your career? Call the Center for Meaningful Work. Whether you're looking to change jobs or be happier in the one you're in, the Center for Meaningful Work can help you look at your values, define your goals, and achieve balance in both your professional and your personal life. Call the Center for Meaningful Work at 828-687-6688. In Asheville, that's 828-687-6688. And now back to my guest, Alan Muscat, the Mushroom Man. Mm-hmm. So, Alan, tell me more about some of the medicinal properties of mushrooms.
Well, for the most part, it's easy to sum up as immune-boosting tonics. That's mostly what you find with the mushrooms, including the reishi that I mentioned, which grows pretty abundantly in this area as well. And I think the reason for that intuitively is that your mushrooms are growing in a hot, moist environment that, as you know from the locker room, is, you're likely to get, infections. And so they're trying to protect themselves from, secondary like molds and things attacking them. And I think we get those same compounds, when we eat them. And that's what you are mostly getting when you even find also cancer remedies. And there's, words in there like, PSK or something. That's a abbreviation for, the active components in some of these mushrooms that are really common in this area and in Asia, where people use them more traditionally. They don't just wait till they have cancer and pop a pills. They take them as teas, or they brew them, in soups. And that way, as tonics is what they're called, over time, they prevent things like cancer and other, chronic diseases. I mean, even AIDS, they've shown activity against it with some of these mushrooms.
Now, wasn't there something about the Chinese women's track team being super performers thanks to a mushroom?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to joke about it. It's one of your more unusual mushrooms. It's parasitic on live larvae of beetles and things like cicadas. So the bug is hibernating under the ground. You're walking through the woods and you see a little bright orange mushroom, and you pull it up, and it's attached, coming out of the head, of this mummified insect. And you'd think, like, if you showed that someone, they'd run away really quickly. But the Chinese track team, they eat them, and then they run really quickly because it's supposedly this huge stamina builder. And there's been studies on it, it has shown, that it'll build up a person's energy. So it's not, settled that was the only thing they were taking, and but it's very commonly sold and used by people now, and it's an exotic thing. I found it here, but it's important to realize there's always local things to help you in the ways that you might need to buy something expensive and unusual. And like you were talking about affinities, I think often, like the reishi, which does grow here, what we need is right in our backyard, right nearby, in great quantity.
But we're not taught to find it or afford even.
Because you can't sell it if everyone can get it for free.
Right. Who do you teach in your classes? And where do you teach?
Yeah, well, I do workshops and special classes at everything from universities and continuing ed programs to nature centers, science museums, sometimes on the culinary end, like for the staff at a restaurant or a chef's training program. And I've also done weekends offered to the public for on wild foods. I teach with a fellow named Frank Cook, who's more of plant wild foods, and so together we cover that whole range. And I like the longer things, and I think I'll do less short introductions and more things that are a weekend or a week long for people who want to get more experience. Because like I said, we could talk sitting here for like 3 hours before we actually tried something. Yeah.
What do you love most about your work? How does it give you a sense of meaning or purpose?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's one of the reasons I like to do the longer classes, because we can get sort of bogged down in the details, of identification. There's 10,000 mushrooms out there, and all these frequently asked questions about edibility. And I've been teaching, over 5 years, and I've found that although it's a step to empower yourself to and empower other people to feed themselves and find their own medicine, there's another level for me when people start to engage with them as possible friends, having that affinity, and that's where I find, I think, the most meaning, and I think it starts with when I teach, sort of respecting the students as having something to offer too, and that we're here, in a mutual way, and that people aren't just, here to get information from me, but like we're forming a relationship, that's equal. Mm-hmm. So I start with that, and it's another reason I like to do longer things, so that it's more of a experience and less of just a, transferring information. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should you cook mushrooms, or is it okay to eat them raw?
Well, yeah, that's probably one of those most frequently asked questions, and probably one of the most important things I get out of the way, which is it's important to cook mushrooms. And it's fun to say that, for all mushrooms, because then I time people, and invariably people ask me the obvious question.
They raise their hand and say, ooh, yeah. But I eat them raw at the salad bar all the time.
That's right. Yeah, and the truth is that, basically as much as you've chewed that mushroom is as much as it's going to be digested, because your body can't digest it's something related to chitin called beta-glucans in the mushroom that isn't like cellulose and isn't like more fiber in your diet. It's kind of like swallowing, chunks of wood. So you want to cook your mushrooms, and you might not have a problem, like at the salad bar. But you also won't get the nutrition that's in those cell walls, because that's what they're made of, is that same stuff that lobster shells are made of, just in a flexible form.
Huh. So what kind of nutrition is in them? Protein, carbohydrates, vitamins?
Yeah.
What's in there?
I mean, I like to say again, intuitively, the reason something like a portobello tastes so meaty is because it has a lot of protein.
Huh.
And mushrooms can have more protein than any vegetable, except maybe soybeans, which are very difficult to digest unless they're fermented. But the mushrooms are much more digestible, and they have certainly carbohydrates. They have a whole range of minerals and vitamins. It's very surprising to people. And I grew up being told that, mushrooms have no nutritional value, and maybe the ones in the store, don't have that much. I know that they can also have a lot of pesticides if they're not organic. So that's something to pay attention to.
When people are wanting to form a relationship with a mushroom as its own sentient being, how do you best suggest that they do that? Like talk to it or touch it or just sit by it? Or?
Yeah, it's interesting. We teach what we have to learn. And I'm no expert on this. This is my, growing edge. And it's something that Frank has a lot more experience with. So he'll guide people, through visualizations, which never work for me because, I don't know, it's hard for me to go there. But I think that intention will guide reality. And I think that just having that belief, I think, is going to be understood. And, it can be misguided, because if I make friends with a mushroom, then, it's as if I made friends like with your genitals. It's only a part. It's the reproductive part of a fungus. The fungus you don't see necessarily. And that fungus is part of the forest. So you're not making friends with an individual either. Like people often, I've been on a lot of plant walks. They say, okay, make friends with mullein, make friends with dandelion. That's a species. That's like saying make friends, if I'm a Martian, say make friends with human being. Like as human beings, we feel like, oh no, we're individuals. And in some ways the plants are. And in some ways they're not. And that may actually be something more advanced in a sense than thinking that we're separate. As we can see, how many problems that's created. So I'm not sure, it raises a lot of issues, and I'm not sure how. Like maybe you start to do that and it's freaky because then you eat them. And well, do you eat your friends? So it's really just opens a whole bunch of questions that I'm excited to discuss with people.
I guess you eat your friends if your friends want to be eaten.
Yeah.
Let me take another commercial break.
Sure.
Are you going through a difficult time in your life? Have you suffered a loss? Are you going through a transition? Or are you having trouble communicating with your partner? Insight Counseling offers individual and couples therapy in Asheville. Elizabeth and Richard Garzarelli are both licensed, experienced therapists. We accept medical insurance and can usually get you in for an appointment within a week. Call us at 828-681-1014. That's 828-681-1014. And now back to Alan Muscat. So, Alan, got any good mushroom jokes?
Oh, gosh. I had a bunch of stories. I have the one standard joke everyone's already heard. And all
right. Do you have any good stories?
Well, let's see. Let's see ones that I can tell over the radio. I remember bringing in one of my first mushrooms to a restaurant right in town. And it was this huge chicken of the woods. And that's something that's bright orange on top, bright yellow underneath. Probably a lot of people have had them just in their yards growing. And this woman must have seen it before and really appreciated it, because she said, came up to me as I was heading to the back to the kitchen. She was just a patron, said, "Oh, what a beautiful mushroom you've picked. And now it's dead and it'll never grow back because you killed it." And she stormed off.
But the fact is, it will grow back eventually, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I encourage people to go out and, decimate the woods by picking as many mushrooms as you can, because you won't find them all, because what are you going to do otherwise? You're going to be buying your food that's trucked in from California, and sprayed with pesticides that are running off into the environment, and the trucks are creating acid rain. That's killing the mushrooms so they will never grow back. That's what's doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about these folks who sell logs seeded with mushroom spores in the back of magazines? It sort of takes the mystery out of looking for mushrooms, but I guess that would be a ready supply of mushrooms in your backyard. What do you think about that? Yeah,
I often say I'm sort of not disciplined or smart enough to do that instead of running around everywhere. And it's not my specialty. It certainly doesn't have that unknown, although some people will tell you, that's just not worth it. It's so undependable. And it is important to get a company that will guarantee it or send you more, because you can buy the whole log or you can buy these plugs that you drill in. And it's very easy. And it's very worthwhile, except that it doesn't always work, and you may just have to try again. And usually you plug a whole bunch of logs, and some will fruit and some won't. It's it's just like the beginnings of agriculture. And I also, the same thing goes even more so for going out hunting in the woods. You can have a feast or famine, and I'd sort of come to a place where I don't necessarily go out to find mushrooms. I go out and try to just say I'm going for a hike, and maybe I'll find mushrooms.
That way you won't get disappointed. You'll just be thrilled that you had a nice hike.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.